Here they are, the Fourth and Long Fantasy Brothers.
Welcome to episode 23 of the Fourth and Long Fantasy Football Show. My name is Corey, and I am here with my actual brother, Justin.
Hello, this is Justin.
Justin, it's episode 23, and it's week 8, and we are halfway through the fantasy football season. What's going on in the NFL this week?
Yeah, so we had the big news that Antonio Brown is now signing a one-year deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Wow. I mean, I kind of figured that Antonio Brown would resurface in the NFL at some point. Wasn't sure what team would take a shot at him given his off the field issues. But yeah, he's going to the Bucs now, joins that loaded offense with Tom Brady under the helm, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Gronk, Cameron Brate, Ronald Jones. Man, they're looking like the Golden State Warriors of the NFL, aren't they, Corey?
Yeah, this is clearly Tom Brady getting together all the pieces to make a real big playoff push. But also, I think, Justin, if you're listening to Bruce Arians over the past couple weeks, he has been saying over and over again, whether it's to national reporters or beat reporters or whoever it might be, our receiving core is not healthy, and we're seeing that again, right? Mike Evans surely doesn't look 100%. Chris Godwin, we're going to talk about again in a few minutes. Scotty Miller was down. These receiving options are not the options that we thought we would have coming into the season. They're not 100%. They're clearly limping throughout the season. So adding AB may just be adding another layer to try and get more health and more optimism in that passing game.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how the target share unfolds here. I mean, there's a lot of mouths to feed for Tom Brady. I'll be curious to see when he does come back. I guess he's eligible to play week 9 against the Saints, so we'll have to wait one more week, but it'll be interesting to see what happens when Brown's in the fold here.
Justin, this is still, to me, step 1 of 5 or 6 steps that have to take place, right? The guy needs to show up to the building. He needs to prove that he's not a knucklehead anymore. He needs to prove he can still play, and he hasn't lost it, even though he's been out of the NFL for almost a year at this point. There's a lot of things that still need to fall in place for AB. So I'm not counting this as a guaranteed thing yet, and I am not saying that AB is like the guaranteed wide receiver 1. To me, we're still very much in a wait and hold pattern. I hope that Antonio Brown is fine because, boy, we could sure use the entertainment value of having him back. But at the same time, this guy's got a lot to prove before I trust him.
All we have to go off of right now at this point is that one game that he played with the Patriots. Remember how much Brady peppered him? He had a touchdown. That's all we have to go off of right now. If it's anything like that, I'd be pretty excited on Antonio Brown.
Justin, would you be completely surprised, though, if in week 9 he plays, he gets peppered just like he did with Tom Brady that one game, and then here we are maybe 2 weeks later and he's out of the NFL again?
It could happen, man. Brady was one of the key cogs in getting him to Tampa, so I could see it happening, man. I guess wait and see. If you happen to pick up Antonio Brown off the waivers, last week or this week, just hold, wait and see what happens.
Yep, agreed. Well, Justin, why don't we get into some injury quick hits? We got a few this week, just like we have in all the past weeks. And let's get started with the latest star who's gone down, and that is going to be one Odell Beckham Jr.
Yeah, bad news for OBJ, done for the year. The tight ends become a little interesting. I'll talk about one of those tight ends a little bit later.
Justin, talk about a strange injury situation that just won't seem to go away. Michael Thomas has another issue now.
Yeah, hammy for Michael Thomas here. It's odd how this is all playing out. Will he be a Saint past the trade deadline? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, Justin. And I said I would talk about Chris Godwin later. Let's talk about Chris Godwin right now. He broke his finger on that touchdown catch he had last week. So what's the situation here?
Yeah, it's potentially only a 1-week injury here. Evans should see a bit more work here in week 8.
Justin, next up we have Deontay Johnson. Oh boy, another Deontay Johnson injury. The guy looks so special, but he just can't stay on the field.
Guy's seeing double-digit targets every single game he actually plays. But man, I'm ready to give him the injury-prone tag until further notice.
Justin, try to withhold your surprise here, but Deshaun Jackson's injured.
Yeah, came back, got hurt, same story, different year.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Justin, here's an interesting situation. Kenyon Drake goes down with a pretty nasty ankle injury. This could open up some opportunity.
Yeah, they're saying Drake's going to miss the next few weeks. Edmonds is definitely the pickup, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Edmonds takes this job and runs with it.
Neither would I, Justin. Another high-end RB2 went down as well, and that's Chris Carson.
Yeah, grade 2 ankle sprain for Chris Carson. Homer and Hyde, maybe DJ Dallas should take the load here. I don't know if there's necessarily an ad. He should be back soon.
Justin, what's the latest news on Christian McCaffrey? Will he be back this week?
Yeah, he came out dressed for practice wearing a red non-contact jersey, and then he actually shed that jersey right before practice started. He could be back as soon as Thursday, man. If you held McCaffrey, if you had him, his first overall pick, get excited. He could be back Thursday night.
And Justin, this guy isn't really a fantasy option, but a lot of the ancillary weapons are. What's the news with Andy Dalton?
pretty nasty concussion. We saw the hit on Sunday, pretty bad for Andy Dalton. I'd be surprised if we see him anytime back soon. It really hurts all the offensive skill weapon players. You look at like CeeDee Lamb. I mean, the guy got ghosted. It's going to hurt Amari Cooper, going to hurt CeeDee Lamb. It's going to hurt Zeke Elliott. It's going to hurt Dalton Schultz. I'm avoiding the Cowboys offense until further notice. I hope that they end up grabbing or maybe trading for a quarterback to help salvage the season here.
Yeah, it's definitely tough to watch. Well, Justin, let's get looking forward. And before we look too much forward, let's go back to last week. Last week, we talked about a couple of guys. Actually, with one guy, we're going to look back a couple of weeks because we talked about Tua last week, who couldn't really play because, right, the Dolphins had their bye, but he will be playing this week, which is very exciting. But a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned Julian Edelman. And boy, Justin, I wanted to see if Julian Edelman could step up. He did not. He definitely did not. The whole New England Patriots team did not. And Julian Edelman looks like he just can't separate this year, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily Edelman or if it's Cam Newton. I mean, I do agree, though, Corey. I mean, it does look like Edelman's lost a bit of a step, but, man, Cam Newton is not doing him any favors. You have to wonder if there's that, COVID hangover for Cam Newton. It's, it was reported that a lot of his mechanics have looked kind of loosey-goosey, I guess you could say, ever since he came back. I don't know, man. I'm concerned about the Patriots offense.
Justin, I said this was Edelman's swan song this year, and boy, it's not a pretty song so far. I think he is on his way out of fantasy relevance pretty quickly. If you are still hanging on to him, you're hanging on to him by a thread. Well, Justin, what about you wanted to see if we were seeing the beginning of a new era in Detroit? And we might have. Let's talk about DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that it's a DeAndre Swift and Adrian Peterson backfield here. I mean, Kerryon Johnson is just not part of the Lions' game plan. I don't see it happening here for Kerryon Johnson here for the rest of the season. But, yeah, DeAndre Swift looked good again this week. He had a couple catches. He had 9 carries, got 13 combined touches this week. In my mind, he's an upside RB3 until further notice.
Yeah, Justin, I got to agree with you. I think we are seeing the changing of the guard here. It seems like DeAndre Swift's job, and boy, it just looks like every time he touches the ball, he's a threat to score. He's looking like he might have been a real deal this year. It took him a little while to get going, but he seems to be the next answer in Detroit. But we'll see how the next few weeks play out. Well, Justin, with that said, I say it's time to get moving. Let's get to it.
On today's show,
all right, we will continue our weekly format for you this week. Today, Justin and I will discuss the past, a present, and a future topic as we reflect on Week 7 and the week that was, and we get you prepared for your Week 8 matchups. Justin, let's get things started with a running back that you and I talked about way back, and I think it was either Week 1 or Week 2, and that is the Jacksonville running back, James Robinson. What did we learn coming out of Week 7?
Yeah, man. Can we deem this dude the best waiver wire pickup of 2020? I say yes. The young rookie has been a revelation for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, interesting thing that I saw this week was that running backs with more fantasy points than James Robinson this season, Alvin Kamara. That's it. That's the end of the list. He's got a stranglehold of this backfield, man. He's handled 95% of the running back rushing attempts this season for the Jaguars. The next closest is Derrick Henry for the Titans at 85%. That's crazy usage, man. 95% of the rushing attempts for that backfield. Now, we talked about Robinson before. You mentioned it, Corey, and we initially considered him more of an RB2 with some upside. Man, his combination of elite usage and production makes James Robinson an RB1 until further notice, Corey.
The comparison I absolutely love with Robinson, Justin, is like if you took Chris Carson and put him on a team that literally had to use him all the time. And that's exactly what we have here with James Robinson. I mean, he's a talented guy. He's a power back with a little bit more to him. And yeah, I mean, especially with all the injuries that we have been riddled with this year, I mean, you cannot say that James Robinson is anything less than an RB1 right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, and look at this past week, dude. The guy got 30 PPR points. That's a week-winning sort of week out of a running back. That's great.
Justin, one guy who has not been supplying any kind of weak wins is a guy named Cooper Kupp, right? A guy who for sure we were expecting to have a much better year than the year we're seeing. Now, look, for all the Rams that were talked about over the summer, Cooper Kupp wasn't really talked about much compared to the other members of the LA Rams. Robert Woods was supposed to be an absolute stud. Some people were saying he's that wide receiver 1. Every analyst had, quote unquote, their guy at running back, which, boy, we couldn't hear the end of until we actually started the season. And guess what? We still can't hear the end of it. And many were on the Tyler Higbee train, which that may be a train you might want to jump off if you're still on it. But look, most of those situations have played out in a variety of ways, but Kupp was supposed to be a rock-solid wide receiver 2 heading into the year. And here we are, Justin. We're going into week 8, and Kupp has been incredibly underwhelming. He's playing more like a boomer bust wide receiver 3. Kupp has only had 2 good weeks, and I stress the word good because they have not been the Cooper Kupp week winning weeks that we're used to. There's only been a couple more okay weeks where he's not, tank your fantasy team. But other than that, the rest have been real duds. While the likes of guys like A.J. Brown and Amari Cooper and others were being drafted in the same range as Kupp, Kupp has certainly not lived up to his draft value, and I don't see it turning around anytime soon. What about you, Justin?
Yeah, it's concerning. I had Cooper Kupp, I think, as a top 15 wide receiver heading into the season this year. I liked his upside. He had shown that he could be an elite touchdown scorer. He's just not getting the looks in the end zone that he needs to be sustainable as a wide receiver 2 or even a wide receiver 1. I'm not going to panic totally. He's a talented guy. We've seen it in the NFL before. Stay patient if you own Cooper Kupp. Don't sell him for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he has much value, especially in trade right now. He may be worth buying, but at the same time, there seems to be 4 wide receivers that this team is dead set on rotating through. You're obviously seeing Robert Woods all the time, but other than that, Van Jefferson and Josh Reynolds are not going away. So it's just a murky situation, and if you drafted Cooper Kupp this year, you have to be disappointed. So, Justin, we just talked about a couple things we've learned from the past, but let's sort of look to this week. And as we're leading up to our week 8 games, why don't you talk to us about a guy that you're really interested in as we move into week 8?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about OBJ's injury at the onset of the show here, and I think one of the main beneficiaries, at least in week 8, is going to be the tight end Harrison Bryant. He was a 4th-round pick out of FAU. He's a big athletic dude. He won the John Mackey Award his senior season for the nation's best tight end. And in week 7, he received PFF's highest grade out of all rookies. He looked good, man, and Baker needs to throw to somebody. I think he went 4 for 56 and 2 touchdowns in week 6. Now with OBJ out of the picture, Austin Hooper is also supposed to be missing week 8. Brian has legit upside for week 8, man, and potentially longer. If you're one of those managers in the ever-revolving, barren tight end landscape, right, scoop this young guy up and see what happens.
Yeah, Justin, I like it. I mean, especially in the tight end landscape that we're in right now where, boy, it is quite messy and even the consistent guys are starting to fall off and not be as consistent as we expected. If you want to take a shot on Harrison Bryant, I say go do it. But, Justin, I think there's one other guy this week that you want to take a shot on, and it's maybe like the obvious pick, but I think it's a pick that's worth going into, and that's JaMycal Hasty. Look, it's San Francisco, so we're never not looking at a committee here, but understand that the explosiveness we want in guys like McKinnon, Coleman, and Wilson can be found right here in JaMycal Hasty. Much more on the level of Mostert, I have a sneaking suspicion that we are looking at a guy who will force himself into the rotation for the 49ers above Coleman, above McKinnon, and above Wilson when and if everybody's healthy. Now, let's not get bogged down in the numbers here, but I will say Hasty has nothing that the number crunchers will hate. He put forward a great yards per carry in his real debut this past week with the Niners. But instead, let's consider how he looked. And I'll go back to what I said earlier, Justin. This is the guy you see with the explosive tendencies when he gets the ball in his hand in the San Francisco backfield. It reminds me a lot more, like I said, of Mostert and a lot less of the guys like McKinnon or Coleman. He's my clear waiver wire ad for the week, Justin. And not just for this week, but for weeks to come, because I see him working into this offense more and more as the weeks move forward.
Yeah, it was crazy how Jeff Wilson kind of came out of nowhere and was the snap leader at a great game, week 7, but got hurt. JaMycal Hasty is really the only healthy running back here for the 49ers. It's a great call, Corey. I think he's the priority waiver wire pickup here this week. I like the call.
Yeah, enjoy him this week. Start him this week. Know that it's going to probably be a pretty good situation. But after that, I think he's going to have value in this offense. Justin, let's move past the present situations and let's look to the future. Who's one guy that you want to look at this week and figure out what his situation is going to be moving into the future?
Yeah, I want to look at Mike Evans. And, man, I'm frustrated with Mike Evans. Now, I love Mike, right? He's a top 10 talent at the position. You could argue as well that he's the best red zone wideout in the NFL, but the production just hasn't been there the last few weeks. The last 2 games, he's had 3 catches for 47 yards combined. Not great. Now, he was TD dependent to start the season. There's no denying that. He was leading the league in touchdowns, which was definitely helped buoy up his fantasy value there the first 5-6 weeks of the season. But honestly, Evans is 40th in catches right now in the NFL, and he's just not Brady's main target. But it's because Evans is being doubled on every single play, which is leaving guys like Godwin, Scotty Miller, and Gronk as the main beneficiaries. And Gronk has really emerged these last 2 weeks. It seems like it's been the sacrifice of Mike Evans, which is unfortunate. And now, on top of all that, we add Antonio Brown to the equation, right? More competition for Brady's attention. I'm just kind of concerned here. Now, he's always been a bit of a boomer bust wide receiver one. You know, he has those high weeks, those week winning weeks, and then he has those down weeks, right? Like he had this week and the week prior. But I'm concerned, man. I think Evans might now be more of a high variance wide receiver 2 rest of season. I'm concerned. Now, I'm not selling him by any means because he's just too damn talented to sell, but I'm a little concerned, Corey. What's your thoughts?
Justin, you and I were not super into buying the narrative that was Mike Evans is not going to be valuable because Mike Evans doesn't work over the middle of the field and Tom Brady loves the middle of the field. Is that what's happened here, though? I mean, is Chris Godwin and Gronk getting the attention because they tend to go over the field more, or is this just a situation where he and Mike Evans just don't seem to be on the same page?
I don't know, I was reading something the other day about how, you know, the beat reporters for the Bucs were coming out and talking about how Mike Evans has kind of changed his mentality to the game this year. And he's being, you know, he's kind of taking that whole unselfish approach where he wants just to win at this point, right? He's been in the league for, you know, the last 6-7 years. He's been successful. He's put up 1,000-yard seasons. And I think he's sick and tired of losing. And I think at the sacrifice of his production, he wants to win. And he's given these other players the ability to get open and to put up good squatty stat lines, to be honest with you. Now, I'm not going to sell Evans if I have him in a dynasty format, right? I'm not doing that. But in redraft, man, it might be time to look elsewhere.
Justin, isn't it? I mean, fantasy is just so week by week, and sometimes a week can feel like a year in fantasy football where we analyze every week bit by bit, and we think the sky is falling, right? Julio Jones was supposed to be a complete bust and was supposed to be a guy that you should get off of all your teams, and now that seems like a distant memory, right? Because Julio's back to being Julio. Let's talk about a guy who just doesn't seem to be himself this year, Justin, and that's the guy that I want to look towards the future with. And that's a guy known as Melvin Gordon. And Justin, I am so conflicted on Gordon this year. He starts this year by putting together 2 straight solid RB2 weeks, really good solid weeks to start off his season, even though he had a fumble in week 1. After that, though, he lays a complete egg in week 3, but then puts together a vintage Melvin Gordon RB1 game in week 4. And then the bye hit, Justin. And boy, since the Denver bye, things are now not looking so great in Melvin Gordon land. Melvin initially gets flagged for a DUI, a really messy situation, no matter how severe for fantasy purposes. He misses the next game with an illness, quote unquote. Then he finds his way into the doghouse and loses some immediate first crack work to Phillip Lindsay. Phillip Lindsay looked like the best running back last week and was getting the first running back look, something we hadn't seen all year. But then Phillip Lindsay goes down, and Melvin Gordon, because he's really kind of the lone talented man left in the backfield, saves a 2-fumble day, one of them coming on a pitch back to his quarterback, which was shot way over his head, by putting together a pretty solid RB2 day. Now, it's fair to say, Justin, this season has been, I think the correct definition here would be a roller coaster. Melly can't seem to decide if he wants to be a lineup fixture for your fantasy team or not. And this is a situation where a number cruncher would tell you things are all good, right? Because 1 dud, but 4 other solid games makes for a trustable running back 2, at least. Maybe this year a running back 1. But the whole situation leaves a bad taste in my mouth, Justin. There's still some question on what kind of punishment is on its way for Melvin, if anything, this year. And on top of that, we're watching a guy who has now fumbled on multiple occasions when the team seems committed to giving him the big role. So why is he my future guy? Because I need to see what he can do against the Chargers. A Phillip Lindsay potential injury holdout for week 8 and a matchup against a team that just gave up a huge game to James Robinson, as we noted earlier, may tell us more about Gordon than any stat could. Look at this week as the turning point of the season for Melvin Gordon. Given the injuries around the NFL, will he become a pretty reliable low-end RB1? Or will he be joining the group of nail-biting RB2s that we've come to love and mostly hate? This weekend's revenge meeting with the Chargers will tell the story, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, it's been definitely, like you said, Corey, it's been an up and down sort of season with Melvin Gordon. There's no denying that. And like you said, there's that uncertainty surrounding Gordon's future. And if there will be some sort of discipline, he might be suspended for a handful of games here coming up. You just don't know. You have to hope, though, that he can take hold of this job, especially this week against the Chargers. You know he's going to be motivated, right? Yeah, whenever a player goes against their former team, you always have that narrative, right, that they're going to get fed the ball to, have that quote unquote revenge game. Corey, I don't own Melvin Gordon any league this year, but I have to say, man, he's always been a guy that I've liked. I actually owned him his rookie season, the frustrating rookie season, but maybe that left a sour taste in my mouth, but he's a good player. There's no denying it. He's a great player. He looks good on the field. If he can get over those fumbling issues and take hold of this job now that Lindsey's out of the picture, he could have a lot of upside.
Yeah, and we don't know, Justin, what the situation with Lindsey is. There's a decent chance that this week Melvin Gordon is the lone man in the backfield. There's also a chance that Lindsey passes through the concussion protocol and is ready to go and may take away the RB1 workload from him again. It's really tough to tell what's going to happen this week, Justin. I'm concerned. It's a roller coaster situation. Look for this week to be a good indicator of what you can expect from Melvin Gordon for the rest of the year. I think, is that fair?
I think it'll be a great sort of starting point to see what you can expect of the next, 8 weeks of the season. Crazy to think we're already there. But yeah, I agree, Corey. It's going to be telling to see what he does this week against the Chargers.
So there we go, Justin. Our Week 8 show for the 2020 season is now in the books. Next week, we will continue on with our weekly seasonal episodes. We'll recap Week 8 and get you ready for the big Week 9. Remember to subscribe and hit the bell. Download, follow, like, comment, whatever you have to do to show some support. I'm Corey.
And I'm Justin.
And this has been the Fourth and Long Fantasy Football Show. Good luck in Week 8, everyone.
Royalty-free music courtesy of Ben Sound. The views and opinions expressed on today's episode are that of the Fourth and Long Fantasy Football Show. Remember to like and subscribe.